Coventry City called this place home for 106 years before that final whistle at their championship game with Derby County in April 2005. That signalled an emotional end to an era and a move to a 32,000 all-seater super arena. The club's playing days at Highfield Road may be gone, but the memories of their famous old home will last forever. The ground saw its fair share of great goals, world-class stars, charismatic managers, and of course, plenty of drama. Highfield Road wasn't Coventry City's first home. In fact, it wasn't even its second. The club started life as Singers FC, formed by cycle workers from the factory of the same name. In 1883, their first pitch was located on Dowell's Field, near where the Gosford Park Hotel is currently located on St George's Road.
They used to use the White Lion at Gosford Green as the club headquarters. And as far as I know, they used that as the changing rooms and would trot across from the pub to the field. That pitch would have been almost like a farmer's field with no turnstiles or gates. It was just a pitch on a field, and they probably went round and collected tuppence from everybody who was standing round in a hat.
Singers spent just 4 years at Dowell's Field before moving to a new enclosed ground called Stoke Road in 1887. This was just south of the Highfield Road ground, with the club's headquarters being based at the Binley Oak pub in Paynes Lane.
The Stoke Road ground, they were there about 12 years and it gradually developed, but it wasn't very sophisticated. I think even at the end they had maybe a small grandstand with a couple of hundred people. They had wire around the pitch. They had hedges so that they could actually control the fans, the spectators coming in and take money off them. But it wasn't very sophisticated. But having said that, you know, we've got to remember that Coventry City at that time were in the Birmingham Junior League, which was a very, very sort of lowly league. So the expectations of a grand stadium weren't really there.
Changes came thick and fast for the club around the turn of the century. They changed their name from Singers to Coventry City in 1898, and a year later they moved to the ground that would become their home for the next 106 years. Highfield Road in the 1890s was a far cry from the ground that Coventry are leaving behind.
The area they moved to was actually a cricket pitch with a row of elm trees across the site, almost exactly where the halfway line is at Highfield Road now. And the first job they had to do was remove those elm trees, and then they had to level the pitch, relay the turf, and go about preparing a pitch. I hate to use the word stadium because it wasn't a stadium, it was a ground, but they had an enclosure. They had banking on 3 sides of the pitch, and on the site of the main stand now they had the first stand, which held around about 2,000 spectators. It impressed a lot of people, and the stand was impressive when you walked up Highfield Road, because that was the only street that was built around that area at the time. That's why the ground was called Highfield Road. People coming from the city centre region would walk up Highfield Road, and they would see across the pitch, they would see the stand in front of them.
The early part of the 20th century saw Coventry elected to the Southern League as they started to make a name for themselves in the FA Cup. A record crowd of more than 19,000 saw them lose to Everton in the quarter-finals of that competition. The gate receipts from that cup run enabled them to build a new grandstand on the north side of the ground. That would remain in place until 1964.
They obviously made some good money. I think the receipts for the Everton game alone were £1,000, which was, would be in today's terms would probably be like £500,000. And with the money they made from the cup run, they built a second grandstand on the opposite side, on the site of the current sky blue stand. And that was a bit more impressive than the old stand. I think it held about 2,500 people, and they did some terracing work on the ground. They built a fence around the pitch, and generally spent a bit of money tidying things up.
The years after World War I were rather turbulent for Coventry. They were elected to the Football League, but struggled to cope with a step up in class. The crowds continued to still turn up, however, and the ground's record gate was broken on many occasions. Times were changing at Highfield Road.
They bought an old stand from Twickenham rugby stadium, or rugby ground, and they transported it to Highfield Road and just used the roof as a cover for the what is now the west stand, the west end of the ground. And they discovered when they were erecting it that there was a massive slope from one side to another, so they had to do some hasty engineering to make this roof fit over the terrace, or over that end of the pitch.
Coventry City had always played in blue and white, and in 1922 they decided to change to the civic colours, the city civic colours of green and red. In the close season of 1922, Herbert Kendall and 25 volunteers from the supporters club actually came to the ground during the summer holidays and facilitated a lot of ground improvements, which included the renovation of turnstiles. They more or less completely painted every stand and fence in the ground green and red.
In the mid-1920s, they did move a lot of earth and rubble from the building of the Coventry tramways to Highfield Road, and built up the Cop end, which was the Swan Lane end of the ground. So that made it a much bigger bank than the other sides of the pitch.